All right. All right, so I'm finally live. It's been a while since I did the live streams. Yay, he's here. So the request is accepted. 1 second, hopefully.
Hi.
Yeah, we got you.
It worked?
Yeah, it works. I can hear you. Super.
All right, terrific. I'm glad. I'm trying to set up my phone here so it doesn't keep moving. Okay, great.
Yeah, super.
I'm,
How are you
I'm
doing?
glad we
How
could
is your
make it
day?
work. This is my first time doing a live video here on Instagram, so thanks for the patience.
You did it well. I mean, there was no problems. Sometimes there is actually like a sound problem, so I hope like luckily we don't have it today.
Good. Yeah, you sound loud and clear.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your day. How is it going? So we can start with more questions about your book and everything.
Sure. Yeah. So I am busy editing here. I'll show you my screen. I'm very busy
Oh, wow.
and putting the final touches on Indistractable, my next book, which is all about how to manage distraction, how to do what you say you're going to do in business and in life. And yeah, that's my entire focus right now.
By the way, actually, a lot of people were asking, where is the book like day launch?
Yeah,
What's
it's
the plan?
September.
In where?
September 3rd.
September. Cool. Is it going to
Right.
be like, where do you publish it? So
It'll
can
be,
people immediately start ordering it, or we have to wait?
yeah, it's not available for pre-order quite yet. That's coming up. Probably in the next month or so, it'll be available for pre-order. And then in September, it'll be released in the US. And then in October, it'll be released in the Commonwealth. And so far, we have 8 languages that it'll be
Nice.
printed in. So
Which
yeah,
one? Is there
we
Russian?
we don't have. Yes, we do have Russian. We
All
do. We
right.
have Russian, Portuguese, Dutch, Chinese, in Vietnam, and German.
Wow, that's cool. Not Czech, but why?
Not Czech,
Not
unfortunately.
not big. So let's just start discussing your book because I think that's a very hot topic. Just a quick intro about Nir. If somebody still doesn't know, so Nir is an author of very, I think, must-read book for any designer called Hooked. And I think he's like the person who knows most of all about how to create addictive application services. He basically like described the model on like and shared it with everyone around the globe on how we can get how weak we are and how easy it is to just like make us using something constantly every day. For example, Instagram, we can't get away from it. We used to use it every day, and it's not possible to just even live a day without it. So basically, you took the journey first to discover how do we get addicted using services, and now you took this journey to reverse it back and figure out how to unused to use these
Yeah.
services and how to get back your focus modes and everything. Let us know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a contradiction, but there's that quote that wisdom is found in the contradictions. And so, I wrote Hooked because I wanted to unlock the amazing power of building habit-forming products, that I don't think it should just be Facebook and Instagram and the gaming companies that know these techniques. I want everybody all over the world building the kind of products and services that can really improve people's lives to use those techniques, right? That's why I wrote Hooked. The companies like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Slack and WhatsApp, they already know these tactics and they have for years. I wanted everyone else to know them, right? I wanted everybody else, and people who are building fitness apps and apps to help people save money and apps to help people be more productive at work, they should be using the same exact techniques. I think the real problem is still not that a few companies have figured out how to suck us in. The real problem is that far too many products suck, right? Most UX out there is horrible. And so that's the real problem I tackled with Hooked. And you got to remember, too, that when I wrote Hooked back in 2013, the problem was that there was this explosion of people who were building these amazing technologies, and the problem was that nobody was using them, right?
Yeah.
Things weren't user-friendly enough. That was the big problem. And so that's really what I tried to tackle with the book Hooked. And the goal was never to create addiction. I actually wrote in the book why the goal should never be to create addiction. There's a big difference between an addiction and a habit. A habit is an impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought. And we have a lot of good habits that we can help people form in their lives. Addiction is a different story. Addiction is never good. Addictions are always bad. They always harm the user. We would never want to create an addiction. I think it's actually unethical if you know you are addicting people to continue to addict them. But for everybody else out there, right, for the people who are building products and services to improve people's lives, these tactics for how do we keep people coming back, how do we build these healthy habits can be very, very useful. And so that's why I wrote Hooked. Of course, the question I kept getting asked was, okay, now that you've written Hooked, what's the deeper psychology behind distraction? Why do we overuse some of these products? And I noticed that my behavior was changing sometimes in ways I didn't always like, that I would use my phone when I was with my daughter, when I was with my friends, in ways I didn't really like, and I found it hard to continue to focus on my work. And so it's not that I think that technology is the problem. In fact, in many ways, what I discovered writing this book was that the problem is never the technology. The problem is always with us. It starts from within us. And so I really wanted to write, and everything I read all these books about distraction and technology addiction and all this stuff. And it turns out that when you really dive deeper, it's not just about the technology. It's about what's going on inside us. It's about managing our own impulses in a healthier manner. And so that's really the book I wanted to write, was a book that I could use personally in my own life to make sure that I did everything I wanted to do.
But actually, I think that between the habit and addiction, there is a very, very thin ice, and you really don't know, like, how can you distinguish those things? Like, for example, I don't know, I use everyday Instagram or anything like services. I don't know if I'm addicted or not. It's kind of very thin, distinguished. How do you do that? How do you figure it out?
Yeah. So it's, number one is harm. Are you harmed by it? So if you're not harmed by it, if you just like to use it a lot, then that's not an addiction. Alcohol is very addictive. A lot of people are alcoholics. But if you can have a glass of wine and it doesn't harm you in any way, then it's clearly not addictive. The second criteria is that you can't stop even when you want to. And so many people say, oh, Instagram's so addictive and Facebook's so addictive and email's so addictive. Well, have you tried to stop? and so for most people, the answer is, well, not really. I don't really know how to stop. And so that's really why I wanted to write Indistractable, was to give people a formula for here's how you can put it in its place. And the good news is you don't have to stop. You can actually make sure that it's in your life in a way that helps you as opposed to harms you.
Yeah, but actually, there are a lot of discussions right now in internet, anywhere, in YouTube, anywhere, about do we have enough willingness to control ourselves, to say, like, no, today I'm not going to, I don't know, go to Instagram or like Facebook or whatever. Like, can we control ourselves? Can we even create a schedule for us or some kind of rules how to stay focused? I feel like I'm weak at this. I cannot do this. Like, if I say to myself, okay, here are the rules I'm going to follow, 2 days, the next third day, I'm going to be unhappy and like really come back to my habits.
Yeah. So that's why it starts. So there's a lot of techniques out there that get thrown out. And one of them is, go on a digital detox or digital minimalism, or, just throw away your devices because that's the problem. And here's the thing. Distraction is not a new problem. Socrates and Aristotle talked about the nature of acrasia, this tendency that we have to do things against our better interest, 2,500 years ago. And people have been struggling with distraction forever. It's just the latest tools of distraction that we find, we think are different, but there's nothing different about them. And so what we need is a methodology. What we need is a way to think about it and tackle all the areas that account for distraction. And once we do that holistically, then we can become what I call indistractable. And so it all starts, for example, it's, a lot of people will implement just one tactic and they forget about the other tactics, and that's where they get tripped up. So for example, scheduling your time, scheduling your day can be very effective. But if you haven't taken the other steps, then you're going to fail.
For example, let's make, like, with the beginning of the year, every one of us started to schedule our days from scratch, saying like, okay, I'm gonna wake up early, do this and that and that. And like, I did this again this year. I think I was doing it for like a couple of years lately. And every time I say to myself, here are the schedule I'm gonna stick to, I think that's feasible, I think like I can do this. Essentially, it all comes back to what I feel. I feel like today I don't have enough energy for this. I don't have enough energy to I don't know, go to the gym or to
Yeah.
wake up early or whatever. And then essentially it all comes back to what you feel, and what we feel we can't always control. Like that's my constant struggle with this question.
Perfect. Perfect. So this is actually the first step, is to realize that distraction starts from within. And it's exactly these feelings that most people never think about. The fact is, I wrote about in Hooked, I wrote about these internal triggers, these uncomfortable emotional states that prompt us to action. Well, the same thing applies to behaviors we don't always like. So this is exactly what happens. You don't feel like you want to do something, and that internal trigger that you don't have a way to deal with in a helpful manner leads you towards distraction.
Yes.
So the first step is to realize that distraction starts from within. You have to have the tools to deal with that discomfort. It is absolutely right. You can't control how you feel, but you absolutely can control what you do in response to that feeling.
But that's kind of willingness. Like, do I have enough energy to fight this feeling?
Not necessarily. It's not always about necessarily energy or willpower. In fact, in my book, I talk about how willpower is actually a myth, or at least the idea that you have a decreasing amount of willpower. It's called ego depletion. It turns out that's not true. Only if you believe it's true is that true. So it turns out, so you don't necessarily have to be a slave to those feelings. Many people say, "Oh, I don't feel like it right now," or "I don't want to do it." So it's not necessarily that you have to fight yourself with willpower. What you can do is what I call reimagining. And what experts tell us is that when we think of the internal trigger differently, when we have tools in place to help us cope with that discomfort, we can get through it easier. So for example, the first thing you can do is to simply note that sensation. That as opposed to saying, "Oh, I don't feel like going to the gym, so I won't go to the gym." If there's other steps we have to do, for example, like planning the time. That's actually the second step. But let's say the first step is, you already planned to go to the gym, but you don't feel like it. As opposed to what most people do, they just go on with their day. What I instruct you to do is to take a few minutes and just feel it without judgment. Many people stuff it down and say, "I'm a bad person," or I have a bad attention span," or something. They beat themselves up. No, instead what you want to do is to just focus on that sensation. The next thing you want to do is to write down that sensation. To literally write down what it is you're feeling.
Is it my connection problem? Or wait a second, the connection is kind of lost for me.
Am I still there?
Wait a second. You were lost. I don't know if it's only for me, but guys, let me know if it's my connection problem or it's on the other side. No, okay. So, sorry, that's probably
No problem.
my internet connection.
No problem. I think people can hear us, so that's good. Yeah, so basically the first step with reimagining our internal triggers is number one, number one is to note that sensation.
Yeah, but, okay, so
to actually write it down.
I'll try to catch on.
Okay, to actually write down that sensation. Then what we want to do is we want to have practices in place that help us cope with that sensation in a more healthy manner. So for example, one take I know I really don't want to do, like skip going to the gym or Google something when I know I should be writing, then I give myself what's called the 10-minute rule, which allows you to surf the urge. It's allowing yourself to just think about that sensation for a few minutes. Just, okay, what is it that I'm experiencing in my body? And psychologists tell us that by just focusing on that sensation, not fighting it, not resisting it, but just focusing on that sensation for 10 minutes. And if at the end of 10 minutes, I still want to go do the thing that I didn't want to do, then I can give into that temptation, whether it's eating something unhealthy or giving into a distraction. In 10 minutes of mindfulness, of just thinking about that sensation, I allow myself to give in. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, it goes away. That sensation goes away. So
it sounds like meditation that a lot of people say, like, it helps.
Right. So no, this isn't meditation.
Yeah, but like people say, like, get away, change your mind flow, like.
Yeah, it's more mindfulness than meditation. I don't tell people to do meditation. I've tried meditation for years and years, and it doesn't do much for me. That's fine. It doesn't have to. Meditation is great if it works for you, but it's not the only recipe out there. What I'm telling people to do is to focus on the negative sensation, to think about the negative sensation, so that you can gain greater control over it. Because it's exactly what you said. I don't feel like it. It feels bad. I don't want to. And the solution to that, just by simply naming it and giving it time, turns out you can gain it. So it's for you, great, but that's not the only.
For some reason, my connection is. Can you hear me guys well? Because I don't know why it's like disappearing all the time.
Yeah, it looks like it's cutting out a bit.
Yeah, now you're back. I'm sorry for this technical.
No problem. Yeah, so it's only, again, this is only one of 4 techniques. So one thing you can do is reimagine the internal trigger, learn to gain control over those emotions. We can also figure out how to reimagine the task. So in my book, I talk about how you can learn to see the task differently. Part of the reason people hate going to the gym or hate doing their work or hate whatever the thing that they want to get distracted from is that they don't look at the work properly. That there are certain techniques we can use to make anything into an act of joy. And imagine how powerful that would be. Imagine if going to the gym was actually fun, right? Then you wouldn't have to fight with willpower to get yourself to go. So there's a lot of things that we can do in that realm as well. So we can reimagine the trigger, we can reimagine the task, and we can also reimagine our temperament. That a lot of people believe some self-defeating myths about how their capacity to do something. And one of them is what we talked about earlier, this idea of ego depletion. That, oh, you know, I'm super tired, I worked real hard today, therefore I'm not capable. And it turns out that that's totally not true. It's only true if you believe it's true. So there's all these things we can do. So it's reimagine the trigger, reimagine the task, and reimagine our temperament. That's how we change our response to these internal triggers. What is reimagine, by the way? Like, is it like tricking your mind? Is it like telling yourself, no, you didn't do enough? Like, you go, like, you're a lazy person, go do more. No. It's about seeing things differently. That's what reimagining means, is seeing it differently. So most people, as you say, you know, they beat themselves up. They say, oh, you're lazy, you're this, you're that. And that actually has been shown to be highly ineffective. That studies find that people who are more self-compassionate, people who talk to themselves like they would talk to a friend, are actually much better at achieving their long-term goals. So part of the problem is that, you know, if you hear yourself talking to yourself in a way that you would never imagine talking to a friend, that's part of the problem. Don't do that. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend. Like if a friend told you, man, I really don't feel like going to the gym today, what would you say to that friend? You wouldn't say, oh, you're so lazy, right? But we say that to ourselves all the time.
If that's the best friends, you can, but not everyone. Yeah. Okay. Kind of ignore, just go through the questions that people were asking us in the Instagram moments, in the stories, and then we can go through the questions if somebody has in the chat. So, so Confused Designer was asking how to be productive when the idea is not clear and you're not coming up with the better ideas. Like, how do you fight this thing when you're stuck somewhere?
So this book, Indistractable, is really a book of myths. There's so many myths out there about productivity. And one of the myths is that if you just make a goal, right, if you just write it down in your to-do list as a goal, it'll get done. And sometimes goals are great, right? If you know exactly what to do, having a goal is very effective. The problem is having an outcome-based goal when you have no idea how long that those steps would take. For example, if you're trying to come up with a really creative idea, you can't, you know, say, okay, I'm going to come up with a super creative idea by the end of the day. Sometimes it doesn't work that way because you don't know all the steps that are involved. You have to do customer research. You have to do ethnographic research. You have to go talk to your customers. You can't just say, I'm going to come up with a terrific idea by the end of the day, like you would say, I'm going to, you know, pack a bunch of lunches, right? It doesn't work that way. So the myth is that you have to stop planning output and start planning inputs. What does that mean? Everybody out there only plans the output. They say, they put on a to-do list, I'm going to do this today, I'm going to do this today, I'm going to do this today. And you and I both know that doesn't work. It's day after day. You have the things you didn't accomplish that you put on the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day, and to-do lists don't work that well. So instead of planning the output, the outcome, what you want to do is plan the input. And the only thing that you have total control over is your time. So don't say, I want to come up with a creative idea by the end of the day. Say, I'm going to put 4 hours into thinking about a creative idea by the end of the day. And you may or may not it may not come to you, that idea. But that's not the point, because you can't necessarily control outputs. What you can control is the input. What most people do is they're so stressed about what they have to output that they don't ever come around to actually putting in the focused work time. And that's where they get tripped up.
That's a big, let's say, struggle of every creative, since like you still, as a freelancer especially, you have to control your time and management, and like since you are working remotely, you have to manage and deliver on your promises. And then basically you're stressed that you're not going to be able to deliver by the time. And then essentially it all comes back to beating yourself.
Yes. And you're running around all day thinking, oh, what if I don't do it? What if I don't do it? What if I don't do it? And what you didn't do that you had to do was to schedule the 3 hours sitting at your desk actually doing it. And so that's why I say you don't plan the output, you plan the input. And the input is your time at your desk with everything shut off.
What if like you scheduled this time, like you sit, you said, I'm going to do that. You had your coffee, you have your morning meditation, whatever. And then you sit and nothing happens. Like you can't force your mind to start running. Like it's stopped. What do you do?
You go pro. This is what Stephen Pressfield calls going pro. An amateur says, I'll come up with creative ideas whenever they come to me. That's not the way professionals work. Professionals sit at their desk and they do the goddamn work. And you know what? The more work they put in, the more good ideas come out. The problem is that most people never make time for actually doing the work. They're constantly, oh, this email came in and this phone call and this thing I have to do, as opposed to sacredly keeping time on your calendar to actually do the work you have to do. I'm not saying this is happening to you, but I wonder, this is what I see with a lot of people, is number one, the time at their desk is actually much shorter than they think. They sit down at their desk and 10 minutes. When you're sitting, if you try and meditate for 10 minutes or just sit in silence for 10 minutes, it actually is it feels like a long time, right? And so most people, they actually think, I sat down at my desk and I didn't have any good ideas. Well, actually, and then, so what'd you do instead? Well, then I started checking email. Well, how long did you give yourself to come up with great ideas? Was it an hour? No, it was like 10 minutes. So part of it might be that you just didn't give yourself enough time to actually get the ball rolling. What you may want to do is, for writers, you just start writing. Doesn't matter if it's absolute garbage. For illustrators, you just start drawing. For designers, you just start designing. It doesn't even matter if it's any good, but to get the creative juices flowing and give yourself that time. Give yourself, whatever it is, an hour of indistractable time to actually do what you want. And you know what? If nothing comes of it, that's not the point. It doesn't matter, because what's the alternative? The alternative to this method is, oh, good ideas will come to me whenever they come to me, and that never happens, right? So the way to be a professional, the way to be indistractable, is to make time at your desk every day, preferably the same time every day. And you're there whether the ideas come to you or not. And you know what? If you do that, the good ideas tend to come to you. It's when people say, okay, I'll get in a half an hour of work here, and I'll do 15 minutes of work here, and I'll do 5 minutes of work there. That's when it never works out.
That's cool. Favorite products, improving a book. Okay, so I'm asking you if the hooked theory could be applied in the B2B practices. Because B2C, where a lot of people are like using it every day, it's B2C requests to create good experiences, but how about B2B? What do you think?
So any product that has sufficient frequency. So it's not about enterprise versus consumer web. That's not the line of demarcation. The line of demarcation is frequency of use. If your product is not something that's used frequently enough, and the cutoff point seems to be about a week's time or less, then you shouldn't build a habit-forming product. So for example, if your product is sold into the enterprise and it's not used, so what kind of product isn't used frequently? Let's say it's some kind of software that sits on a server somewhere and nobody interacts with it unless something breaks, right? And then it tells you you've got some security breach or something. That's the kind of product that's sold once, and then it's not really used often. So you don't need to form a habit for that kind of product. But if you have a product, whether it's consumers, that's where the world is going, right? With the consumerization of IT, what we see happening is that more and more companies are making products that are adopted from the bottom up, right? So if you think about Salesforce, Stack Overflow, GitHub, all of these products were adopted by the users, by the end users, and then somebody at the top of the organization just asked, hey, where do we send payment for this product? So anytime that a product must be used frequently enough to continue a subscription, so for SaaS type products, whether it's enterprise or consumer web, the same exact rules of the hook model apply. So it's not that every business needs a hook, it's that every business that needs a habit has to have a hook.
Asking here in the chat, how do you focus? How do you get focused? Like any tips, any hacks, any workarounds?
Sure. Yeah, so let me say the four-part model for Indistractable. So the first step is to manage internal triggers that we talked about a lot about. How do you manage these bad feelings so that you don't get distracted, that you do what you really want to do? So that's the first step. The second step is to make time for traction. That a lot of people complain about how distracted they are, how the world is so distracting these days, they can't concentrate, they can't focus. But then when I ask them to show me their calendar, it's blank. They haven't scheduled their day. So the fact is you can't call something distracting unless you know what it distracted you from. And that means scheduling out every minute of your day. Every minute. Don't let yourself say, oh, I'll do it later because you have something planned later. So literally time box every minute of your day. Okay, have a weekly template that then you review with your boss, with your stakeholders, with your family even, to know how you are going to spend your time. So I do this with my family. Once a week I sit down with my wife and we look at our calendars for the week and we make sure that we're synchronized around where we're spending our time. And you can do this with your boss, with your stakeholders, with your clients to make sure they know how you're spending your time. That's what making time for traction is all about. The next step, the third step, is to hack back external triggers. This is all about removing those pings, the dings, the rings that distract you throughout your day. So only about 2/3 of people with a smartphone, never change their notification settings. That's crazy, right? If you haven't taken the 5 minutes to clear off your desktop, to make sure that you're not constantly distracted with the Slack notifications and the Facebook notifications and the email notifications, that's a very simple thing we can do. For office workers, it turns out the problem is more with the open office floor plan, that people coming by your desk and saying, hey, you want to chit chat right now? Or hey, let's have a little, let's go get some coffee. So external triggers are not just about our technology. There are all sorts of external triggers that we have to get under control. And then the last step is about preventing distraction with pacts. And so this is where we can bind ourselves to a pre-commitment device. We can make sure that we do what we want to do by getting into some kind of pact. And there are 3 kinds of pacts. We can enter into a price pact, an effort pact, or an identity pact. So a price pact is where we have some kind of cost if we don't do what we want to do. If you don't finish, if you don't work on a project for an hour today, then you have to pay a friend some money, right? So every day I have a calendar on in my closet that if I don't go to the gym for 1 hour, I have to burn a $100 bill, right? It extracts a cost. I'm not doing the behavior I want to do. An effort pact makes it more difficult if I don't do what I want to do. So for example, every night in my house, the internet shuts off at 10 p.m. We have a router that automatically shuts off the internet. Now I could go and unplug it and figure out a way to go online, but I inflicted some effort to make sure that I do what I want to do. Okay, that I don't get distracted. An identity pact. An identity pact is all about self-image and about, there's an old joke, how do you know someone's a vegetarian? don't worry, they'll tell you. And so the reason we do this, the reason every religion has apostles, why people preach to others, it's not just about getting someone to follow your religion, it's about reinforcing your own belief. So a lot of this has to do with, this is why I call my book Indistractable. It's about having a new identity. No, I am an indistractable person, just like someone would call themselves a vegetarian or a religious person, right? It's part of their identity. I am indistractable. So when someone wants to talk and you can't right now, you say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm indistractable right now. Can't talk. And so that's really what it's about. Those 4 steps of manage internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, and then finally prevent distraction with pact. And if you do all 4, it'll work. This is how you become indistractable. You got to do all 4. You can't just pick and choose.
Second try. He's about to join right now. Yeah.
Hello.
How's it about now?
It sounds better now. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully.
Yeah, let's see how long we can make it work.
Yeah. So I just wanted, since we have a connection at the moment, another question somebody was asking is, do you actually also create products sometimes? Are you sometimes practicing applying your theory in life and work?
Yeah, so I don't do so much of my own product design anymore because now I'm consulting and teaching, but I invest in various companies, and so when they need me to jump in and help out, then I'll do what I can.
Okay, so more of a consulting level.
Yeah.
Okay, so guys, since we have a connection right now, please ask your questions until we get lost. Please ask the best product outcome and strategies behind. Maybe you have any ideas, if there are some strategies you can suggest?
I mean, I think it fundamentally, you know, everybody's heard this before. It's about understanding consumer needs. I think that's where everything from a product design perspective starts. It's building things people want, as Paul Graham said. And I think, you know, there used to be a belief that if you just build a good product and that's enough. And I think what we're discovering is that that's not enough, that there's lots of good products out there, that it's more than just building the best product. The best product doesn't necessarily win. The product that wins is the product that captures the monopoly of the mind, right? It's the product that we turn to first with little or no conscious thought. And so if you're building the kind of product that requires repeat engagement, you really got to figure out how to build that habit, or people are just going to forget that your product even exists.
Asking here, do you have any favorite books? What would you suggest to read?
Oh man, take a look at the bookshelf. There's so there's so many books out there. It's hard to recommend any one particular book. I mean, it just goes. There's so many great books out there. It really depends on what your problem is, right? What you're looking to solve. If you're interested in what books went into my research, then if you look at the bibliography section in my book, there's hundreds of books that I cite in there.
Yeah, but what have you been reading, by the way, in the latest?
I read a book called Suggestible You that was really great about the power of placebos and the power of suggestion, and how that's a great book. Suggestible You was really, that was the last really good book I read. I can't hear you.
No.
Yeah, I think we might have to call it a day.
Yeah.
I think our internet connection is not holding up here.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a bit, but I think it's
next time. It won't be the last.
Technical issues, it happens. Yeah, maybe next time. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. And thank you so much for taking your time and just answering all our questions. Really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you want to say something goodbye or any wish your time.
Yeah, thank you. And if you have any more questions or anything, you can always check out my website. There's a contact form there if I didn't get to your question. I do office hours if you have a question that we didn't get to answer. Just go to nirandfar.com and you can sign up for office hours there, and I'm happy to chat further.
Yeah, actually, it's a very cool blog. I read it frequently, so I really recommend. Maybe I can leave a link later. So,
thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a good day. Bye.
Bye.